The interior of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride has to be one of my favorite places on Earth. Seriously, the fog, the caves, mixed with that spooky ambiance and wind effects, it just really doesn't get much better than that, in my opinion. So one would probably assume that I'd go there as much as I possibly can, and they would be correct. At least before the incident. It happened when I dragged my family to Magic Kingdom a couple years ago. My parents like to do more of the eating experiences, and my younger sister always wants to meet the characters. So they started out the day doing that stuff. I wasn't going to wait for my favorite ride though. So I told them I'd meet them after I went on Pirates. Once I arrived at the ride, I saw that the queue was only a 15-minute wait. I figured I might even go twice if it stayed like that. I made my way through the fairly empty queue, taking notice of whether they had added any set pieces or anything like that. Which they hadn't, but I wasn't taking any chances. I always loved finding new props and stuff that I hadn't seen before. I got onto the ride and luckily got a boat all to myself, which was great. I think the first scene was my favorite part. The one with the skeleton steering the ship and the little beach with the pirate. But another scene I really love is when the ships are firing the cannons at the fort. I don't know if it's the lightning or the sky, but I just find the atmosphere so cool. As soon as I entered that room, I was captivated and started looking around for things I might have never noticed, just like I always do. And that was when I saw a shadow standing in the water at the front of the ship. I couldn't tell at first because it was so dark, but as my boat approached, I began to realize it looked like a man with long hair and a beard. I knew that wasn't on the ride before, and they wouldn't have an employee on set while the boats were running, especially standing in the water. I wondered if it was a guest that finally did what we all wanted to and got out of the boat to explore. That seemed unlikely though, since I was pretty sure employees would have seen him and stopped the ride. I then figured maybe it was just a trick of the light or something, and started paying attention to other things. The boat continued through the next couple scenes, and eventually started to forget about what I'd seen. At least until he showed up again. On the bridge, just as he passed the drunk animatronic leaning against the wall. This time it was obvious he had noticed me, and was staring down at my boat. I couldn't make out any detail from his face, since it was covered in shadow. But I was able to see one thing as I passed. He was slowly lifting his hand as if subtly letting on that he was watching me. I was pretty freaked out after that. So after I got off, I immediately informed the ride operators that there was a guy walking around inside the attraction. They looked suspicious about my story, but said that they'd definitely go check it out. And I didn't hear anything else about it after that, which I suppose you normally wouldn't. But I figured there was really nothing else left I could do. So I met back up with my family and finished out the day. It was a good time, and thankfully I was able to forget about the weirdness that had happened previously. At least until later that night. Once we had arrived back home, I received possibly the most terrifying string of texts that I had ever gotten in my life, from an unknown sender. The first one was the ride photo of the boat I was on earlier, with just me sitting at the center of it. Then this was followed by the words, "Yo ho, a pirate's watching you." My stomach dropped to the floor. It had to have been him, but how could he have possibly gotten my phone number? As I ran into my parents' room to tell them about it, I received a follow-up text that scared me even more. It said, "Next time I'll show you the cannibal room." I honestly didn't know how to handle that. My eyes started to tear up and my chest tightened with fear. My parents told me that we should get the police involved, so we contacted them next. I told them that a random pirate-looking guy who I saw walking around Pirates of the Caribbean was sending me death threats on my phone. I'm pretty sure one of the officers held himself back from laughing. Luckily, they acted professionally enough and coordinated with Disney to see if they could find out anything about the guy, which, after consulting with the phone company, they were able to see that it belonged to someone who had reported it stolen at Disney the morning we arrived. So that didn't really help with the investigation much at all. Park security then apparently did another sweep of the ride, but as far as I know, they never located anything. I figured the guy wasn't just going to hang around the ride and wait to get caught anyways, though. As expected, nothing ever really came about from the texts, and the police's best advice to me was just to avoid Disney for an undefined amount of time. Great, so now I wasn't allowed to go to my favorite place in the world ever again. I did, however, take a break from the parks for about 2 years, and during that time I met this Disney nerd girl, Sam, who I started dating shortly after. The more we talked about Disney and everything, the more I really just wanted to go experience the place with her. I mean, never going back again in my whole life was just an impossible task. So, we ended up going to the parks one day, and at first it was great. There really is nothing better than finding someone who shares your obscure interests that you never thought you'd be able to talk about with anyone else. We pretty much explored the whole park, went on Haunted Mansion, Space Mountain, even went over to Tom Sawyer's Island for a little bit, just having a blast everywhere we went. I don't think the thought about the stalker thing even crossed my mind once. That was until we passed through Adventureland, and I came across the entrance to Pirates. The line was almost completely empty, just like last time. We stopped and looked in for a bit, pondering it, and I realized there was just no way I wasn't going to ride it with her. We both loved that ride too much for that. Once we got on, I'll admit, I was a little nervous. I saw how much she was enjoying it though, and it really calmed me down. We progressed through the ride and entered the room with the ships, where I'd first seen the shadowy figure. There was nothing in the spot where he'd been standing, and when we finally got to the bridge, he wasn't standing above it either. I was elated at the thought that the nightmare could possibly be over, and I could finally welcome the thing I loved so much back into my life for good. Until I heard a splash to my left. I looked over, and Samantha was gone. Standing up, I checked all around the boat, and there was no trace of her anywhere in sight. I started screaming and trying to tell them to stop the ride, but no one seemed to hear me. Not knowing what else to do, I just sat down and waited for the ride to finish. You have no idea how slow that boat ride can feel when you're in a panic to get out. As the boat entered the scene with the prisoners and the dog, I had a slight bit of relief, knowing that the ride was almost over. "Come on, go faster!" To my horror at that moment, I heard Samantha's scream to the right of the boat. She was in the prison cell, behind the bars at the back window, the one with the flames. At that point, I jumped off the boat and started shaking the bars trying to get in, but it was no use. At that point, the ride vehicle stopped, and the lights came on where I was. A minute later, I saw an employee walking towards me with a flashlight. Trying to contain myself, I told them the situation, and security was all over the building within minutes. It seems that the mysterious Shadow Man and Samantha had vanished without a trace, likely through a hatch leading underground. And that was pretty much it. The police claim to still be looking for her till this day, but let's just say I'm not holding my breath. The only thing that was discovered was a note found by me, which was left outside my parents' front door later that night. The note read, "I showed her the room. But don't worry, you'll see it soon too." Hey, it's Mr. Freaky. I hope you enjoyed that original creepypasta. What do you think the creepiest ride at all of Disney is? Leave it in the comments and let's discuss. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel, as well as join the Discord to get involved with the community. Have a horrific evening, everyone, and remember to stay spooky, my friends.